once we forget our culture or connecting to the roots, probably becoming self-reliant is also a little difficult.
Triggers have been there, as sir said, during Kargil war, but today it is not just trigger, it is also our capability. The government of that country can anytime force the provider of that services to switch it off, and hence we'll be left clueless where do we have to go.
And reliability is something which will not develop in one day. The entrepreneurs who are working on these technologies, on one side, you have to build good technologies, and second thing is, how is it going to become socially inclusive?
Continuously provide excellent services and keep on building all those things. So that becomes the first part of challenge development part.
Hello and welcome to the Perspectives brought to you by VisionIAS. My name is Chiranjit Mishra and I welcome you all to today's panel discussion. Our focus today is India's recent vow to march ahead in the direction of Digital Swaraj. Now, data is power in today's world, and data sovereignty is of utmost importance for any major economic power. But why all of a sudden we have decided to march in this direction? To shed light upon that, today we have with us two important panelists, Aditya sir and Ram sir. We're going to shed light upon it. So let's begin this discussion with you answering this first question. Why all of a sudden we're trying to be self-reliant when it comes to the digital technology?
Yes, Charanjit, the concept of self-reliance actually is not new as far as India is concerned. So this was one of our long-term objective in our 5-year plan also. And moving forward, the concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat, which started off, our Prime Minister sir has mentioned it very clearly. When all the supply chains are constrained, can India really survive? From this logic, this concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat started. But in the recent past, what we are observing is a complete different trend. So one is the US tariffs. I can call it as a trigger point. And we understood that we are not safe. Of course, this technological, so for example, during Kargil war, US has denied GPS technology to India. So it's not new. That means whenever there are some critical things or critical circumstances, when you are dependent on other countries, they can restrict. But now what we understand is data is a very important aspect, and technological sovereignty is becoming even more important. So especially when the global dynamics are changing at such a fast pace, and I think we should become Atmanirbhar in terms of technology and data. So, and of course, GTRI's report recently clearly indicates that there is a threat for countries like India if we are completely dependent on foreign apps, especially the technological apps. So we need to become self-sufficient, and that threat is clearly visible as far as India is concerned.
Now, Aditya sir, would you like to add something to it?
Certainly, yes. As Ram sir has said, that's a perfectly valid and recent point. It's not as if that we would want to become independent. That idea of becoming digitally independent or let's say financially independent is new. It's obviously quite old. Every country has always aspired to be as much self-reliant as possible. But the recent triggers are such that triggers have been there, as sir said, during Kargil war. But today it is not just trigger, it is also our capability, our ability, okay, that today we can think about that we can become digitally, financially independent as compared to others. It's when we say independence is not that we are building a wall around us, that we will not interact. I'm sure you understand this thing and our audience is smart enough to understand. Independence here is that we should not be reliant on others, meaning it's not as if that anybody else has a control over me, that they can simply turn off a switch and hence I become completely clueless about what is that is coming next. There are so many examples of this weaponization, as sir said it. If our, let's say, electric grid data is stored elsewhere, as in how much electricity is being traded or is going to somebody else, if we are using some software that require data to be hosted on clouds, and if somebody simply takes control over that, it's not as if that if we are using our own data that it can't be hacked. Hacking is different. But if we are using somebody else's, some other country's own data, the government of that country can anytime force the provider of that services to switch it off, and hence we'll be left clueless where do we have to go. The latest example is that we have an oil company that was using Microsoft services but buying oil from, let's say, Russia. They stopped the services to that oil company. As in Microsoft simply switched off any of the email services, Word, PPT, Excel, all this simply switched off the services. As in, because the data is hosted on cloud, they switched off the services. That means the company will no longer have the ability to access its own documents. Why? Because one country is trying to weaponize its dominance over these technologies. So hence, from this regard, the recent push is coming.
Now, so Swaraj is a term we are all acquainted with. It was an essential part of the Indian national movement. So, how do you relate this digital Swaraj to the Swadeshi and Swaraj movement of the past?
Of course, we can draw parallels to the present willingness to become digitally independent or digital Swaraj with, let's say, the idea that has been there that inspired upper freedom movement also. Starting from, let's say, Dadabhai Naoroji, or we can go even before him also. So Dadabhai Naoroji was talking about drain of wealth, the poverty and un-British rule in India. So he's saying that Britishers' rule has not been benevolent for us. So again, he's expressing the idea amongst the modern ones, expressing the idea that we must be independent, financially digital उस समय नहीं है, but let's say sovereignty होनी चाहिए. Gandhiji's idea of, let's say, Swadeshi movement before that in 1905, Gandhiji's idea of using Swadeshi things, Khadi becomes a symbol of Swadeshi. But then post-independence, later on, we have, let's say, import substitution. Before that, we've got Bombay Plan that also talks about our domestic industrialization. So yes, this idea behind being self-reliant, or as Sir said, Atmanirbhar, this idea has been there. And idea has found its manifestation in various forms. The recent Atmanirbhar being different from the older import substitution, it's obviously quite different. The older one was more about controls. So herein comes philosophy of the government. The older one was about more about controls, that okay, we would want to restrain us from trading with the rest of the world. The present one is not about these controls, it is becoming more self-capable. We need to develop technologies, because today it becomes digital. We need to develop technology industries where our own consumers use them, plus also foreigners also use them. So we don't want our switch, as I just said, we don't want our switch to be in somebody else's hand. We may rather want to hold the switch ourselves. Morally, ethically, we would not like to control the switch unless it is impinging on our rights. But at least I would not like anybody else to hold a switch as to what do I do, what I can't do. The latest example being, let's say, Zoho Mail, for example. Or before that, we had this app called Koo. Now, Koo died a death because there was not enough use of Koo, but it was kind of a parallel to Twitter or social media. So Zoho Mail, the government is trying to push itself first, and hopefully that encourages people also to, instead of using, let's say, Microsoft Suite, people start using Zoho Suite, or let's say accounting softwares, SaaS, or let's say Tally, start using more domestically. Again, we have got Zoho and Odoo. These are domestic products. We can start using these products also. So the idea of digital Swaraj is obviously inspired from Swaraj or Swadeshi movement. But yes, its manifestation today is in this form.
Thank you, sir. So, data sovereignty and data localization, they've always been on the anvil. But what suddenly prompted India, those global trade tensions, that accelerated this pace towards digital Swaraj?
So actually, there is a connecting link, as Sir was talking about. When we use this word self-reliance, so after independence, it was more of import substitution,
Yes.
where we were more restricting imports and trying to develop our domestic sector. After 1991, there was another shift. We said we want to become good in our exports, so that will help us to manage our imports. So that will help us to manage our imports, so that we'll have sufficient forex. This was a slight tilt after 91. And today what we are saying is India should become stronger from inside. Okay, we become so strong that over a period of time, our dependence on foreign technologies or inputs will reduce. As Sir was talking about, like, our switch should not be in others' hand, but it takes a lot of time. In fact, it's like we becoming stronger from different corners. Technology and data is one among them. So we're not looking at only manufacturing right now, because earlier it was like protecting the manufacturing sector alone. So today, trade is rather used as a leverage. In fact, even very close countries are using trade as a leverage to get their things done. So under such circumstances, it becomes very critical that we safeguard many other aspects which are critical for India as a nation. And one such aspect is data, and another one is technology. And clearly, we are able to understand that there is something like a fragmented globalization that is clearly visible. So, though in the name of globalization, so the Western world is very clear. One is whenever they are in trouble, they come up with protectionist policies. And whenever developing countries are facing some problem, or whenever developing countries are growing at a faster pace, they create a problem in terms of asking us to open up our markets or whatever it is. So this is a very clear trend which is clearly visible from beginning, especially from countries like US. But now it is more apparent, very clear and more direct. So when it is so direct, can India afford to take that risk is the question. So definitely not. So we have to connect back to our roots. I call it as roots because one is technology, but once we forget our culture or connecting to the roots, probably becoming self-reliant is also a little difficult. So this is what India has to do right now, and this is what India is trying to do. So when we talk about Zoho's story also, or when we talk about Sridhar Vembu's story also, so it is like a person coming back from US or setting up something in a rural area in Tamil Nadu and trying to create employment opportunities there. And you're trying to build an ecosystem and trying, that is a very important aspect which is very much required. So when you're saying like, no H1B visas for India, means where should the workers go? A kind of a panic is being created in every domain possible. So you not be completely reliant on other countries for employment or technology. Rather, yes, why can't India stand on its legs? So this is what I say, by connecting to the roots becomes very important for India right now. So.
Thank you, sir. Now, sir, we have already started taking baby steps. We have our own indigenous chip, and as you mentioned, Zoho. So gradually, it's taking shape. So, what is going to be the impact of this digital revolution on India's economy, governance, society, and technology?
Right. So when we talk about these self-reliance aspects or baby steps, as you said, yes, these are baby steps as of now. We would like to take bigger strides going ahead. Certainly, the economic impact, the technological, the governance impact, it is going to be a multidimensional aspect. There's no doubt about that. Let's look at, let's say, economic impact of these things. Let's say right now, we at VisionIAS, for example, most of us are using this video is being recorded, will be edited on a software that is owned by some foreign company. Our lectures are hosted on Google Cloud. Our documents hosted on Amazon Web Services. Our data is streamed using live stream that is an Australian company. Our documents are prepared using AI, using Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Adobe. I'm sure you understand where is it going, that all these are foreign companies, and almost everybody in the country, licensed, unlicensed, in the sense fake or as in pirated or real, would be using right now mostly Americans or let's say European software, sometime in some cases the Japanese or something, mostly, but American software is what you're using. Even a 1% dent in that, even a 1% of value that is being that is being going out to the Americans, even if 1% of that becomes a very big start, because we're such a big market over here. A 10%, let's say government is a very big client of Microsoft, or let's say that of Google or of Amazon or of all these services that I've just named. Government is a very big client, and if government starts to push in this direction, it's very going to be a very difficult push. But even a very small step in a sense, just 1%, 2%, maybe 5%, that is going to have a huge impact on the, as a direct impact on the economic aspects of these things. I can't put a number to it, but I'm sure that it is going to lead to proliferation of lot of such technological startups in the country. As in how many or what is the number, there's no way, as in I can't predict the future, but impact is going to be huge, direct as well as indirect. What about the savings? There's going to be huge savings that we're going to do. Now, right now, let's say we are paying license fees to a lot of foreigners. If foreigners are incurring cost in their US dollars, paying worker wages in US dollars to American workers. If Indians develop same things, they are going to pay less wages. Chances are cost of license are going to be fraction of what is being paid. But the more important point is, why don't we adopt? Why don't we adopt, as an economic aspect I'm talking about? Why don't we adopt? The aspect is reliability. Why is it that we, knowing that we can host our data on a locally grown cloud server instead of, let's say, on Google Cloud, why is it that we are paying a premium for that? Reliability is a big aspect. So I would want my data to be hosted and be available to me all the time with lot of backups. So I would want quality services. So when it comes to economic aspect, economic aspect can have a meaningful or substantial aspect only when we develop this reliability part. So domestic entrepreneurs would have to look at this part, that we are going to benefit from this push, but at the same time it has to be a qualitative push from their side as well. That is the economic part. Naturally, it will take a lot of governance, technological, societal aspects, including challenges to build upon that. I think sir could answer that question.
So would you like to add?
Yeah. So another important aspect is like the digital inclusion. Okay, and when we talk about inclusion, basically the language also comes up. So now developing an app in one language itself is a problem. Now I want to connect it to the rural areas, let's say. Then how do I do it? So these are all practical problems that will come up. And reliability is something which will not develop in one day. So we have been using them for so many years and we are comfortable with them. So now, of course, now government employees and the ministers have come up with using Zoho Mail. Now that is acting like a trigger maybe. And we have to see how that is going to follow up with the rest of the people. And that's a good sign, in fact. So government it is a kind of a symbolic aspect where government is telling that we are very clear that we want to become something like independent with respect to these kind of apps. So that is very clear, which is visible. And of course, in India, when we talk about situations where during COVID, hardly 1/4 of kids were having access to education because of lack of access to internet, or maybe this is basically, I call it as digital poverty. Okay, and lack of inclusiveness. So under such circumstances, we've not still fully penetrated as far as technology is concerned. So now the entrepreneurs who are working on these technologies, on one side, you have to build good technologies. And second thing is, how is it going to become socially inclusive? That is another big aspect where governance also comes into picture. It's not just about the quality of it, but also the governance part which comes into it.
Because now, sir, the plan is very ambitious. It's not going to bring about any change overnight. And any ambitious plan incurs challenges. So, what are the challenges that lie ahead?
So challenges, as I talked about and sir also talked about, challenges are multifaceted. When we look at, let's say, our push, when I say push, in a sense, a willingness to become Atmanirbhar in digital space. Challenges, let's start from the first one, development. There are so many apps or startups in India today, and it might have taken a lot of effort to start a Microsoft Office suite at one point of time, but today it's, let's say, quote unquote, not that challenging to start to do the same thing. So first challenge is thinking for the future. As in Microsoft, for example, or Adobe or Google, they are not just providing the services that they were providing in past. They are also building for next set of services that they can provide. So as a business, if I am going to buy a product from some Indian entrepreneur, one, I would want reliability of that product, and second, I would want continuous improvement in that product, or there's something else that can be given over a period of time. So that becomes a challenge. So it's not just about that Indian entrepreneurs or Indian startups would have to build these things. It is also that they would have to continuously provide excellent services and keep on building over those things. So that becomes the first part of challenge, developmental part. Regarding workforce, we have skilled workforce, but we don't have that much, let's say, spend on R&D in the country. Our big firms, they are not spending that much on development of products, digital products. Our big firms are digitizing, but they are not digitizing through self-reliance. So, pun intended on reliance. They are digitizing, but not digitizing by developing, let's say, some in-house softwares. So if that takes place, that becomes a very big leap for the entire country. As in, if, let's say, Reliance Industries or Adani Group or whatever big firms, they start developing their own software systems, which can then be marketed to others as well, that becomes a very big part. So that is the next set of challenge, that how do we force our domestic firms to first adopt, and second, maybe to develop these things themselves. So it's not about lack of availability of talent. It's also about that whether do you see that digitization may investment has a returns for me, or as a business independent developer, or let's say some other business also. Then the next set of challenges, as sir said, languages ka challenge hai. Google develops a service, they have virtually no service for, let's say, Hindi. Even translation for Hindi, real-time translation for Hindi will not work. but real time, near real time translation would for Spanish or even Finnish would completely work. So Apple launches a product, Google launches a product, okay, you can talk to each other and translate. You're talking in Finnish, I'm talking in Spanish. It will instantly translate those things. But Hindi is not that thing. Why? Because what do Google see? How does Google see India as? It sees India as a country that is using English language. That means, let's say 90% of the country is not even within their scope of things, and they don't even care about that. So if a domestic developer has to come up, they will have to focus upon addressing this vernacular market also. That becomes a challenge. 22 official languages in the country, so many dialects in the country. So having multiple language based product becomes another part of challenge over here. So challenges are many. Investment is there, development is there, regulation becomes a challenge. What kind of facilities are provided? Would there be any regulation for those facilities? Will CERT start to start to certify every technology that is being used, especially when it comes to, let's say, risks or hacking of those things? So that becomes a challenge. So challenges going ahead are multifold. But just to conclude my point, I think that now, as you said, baby steps. Right now, we can't be thinking only about the challenges. We must first start to look at opportunities. Challenges आएंगे, देख लेंगे challenges क्या है. अभी हमको challenges right now we would have to look at the picture as in where do we want to go right now. I think that's the bigger step that we would have to take.
So according to you?
So I'll just mention one small story about Zoho. Okay, so when Sridhar Vembu came back from US around 2011, and when he decided to start this company in that rural area in Tamil Nadu, he thought, why can't talent be reaped, or can we, all these rural people who were there in the rural areas, they are talented. They were the people who are going to the urban areas or going abroad and building companies. Why can't we create talent in our own place? So with this logic, they have started this Zoho school. And this Zoho school basically initially started off with 6 students, and there were 2 professors. And unlike other schools where you have to pay a fees to join, they pay you a stipend of 10,000. And that's how talent was developed in Zoho school. That means there is a scope, and India has young population which is ready to learn, and slowly we are doing well. So of course there will be challenges, but yes, now most of them, and one of the security officers' kid who was interested in computers, he was sitting in front of computer and coding. He was also trained, and today is in a very good position in Zoho. This shows, this is what is inclusiveness. It's not just about government. So it is also about the private players. So unless and until this kind of attitude develops, so bringing, I said one problem is, yes, we say trained workforce. Now this trained workforce was developed locally, and there was a lot of effort put in, and it was a success, no doubt about it. It's such a huge company with such great valuation. Now, when we talk about R&D spending in India, of course, R&D, we spend very less on research and development. Having policies is not sufficient. Now, spending on R&D, spending on education. China is spending 10% of their GDP on education. And we are spending, let's say, almost like 2% of our GDP on R&D. And R&D spending is not just about government. It's also about private when you look at US and developed countries. So this is another area where I think is a challenge. That means unless and until R&D is spent, you can't come up with a very good quality product. Then building an ecosystem. See, building an ecosystem and coming up with good startups also depends on government policies. In fact, policies which are long-term and sustaining. So the entrepreneur should also have a confidence on the policies of the government, not just on the paper, in reality. Then I will take up that additional risk and put in my effort as far as building a technology or whatever it is. It's not that a wave has come up, so therefore we want to become indigenous. It should be carried forward in a sustainable manner through all these changes on the education front, on the technology front, on the ecosystem front. Unless we do all this, you can't put things in place and develop on a consistent basis. Otherwise, the theory remains as a theory. So this is what I wanted to do.
Right, sir. Now coming to the last part of this discussion, I would like to know from both of you, what should be the right strategy? Because there's a fear that India may have to sacrifice its preference for openness or globalization, because there's something we need to have our local data centers and all that. So, what according to you should be the right strategy for this digital Swaraj?
I think we have discussed the answer to this question already through our answers previously, but just to put it in kind of a summary way, some part I'll do, some part sir would build upon that. The strategy going ahead, it can't be that we, as just sir rightly just said, it can't be that today there is a talk about this, there's a, it is in vogue today, and today everybody starts to do this thing, we start to do this thing. It requires a sustained effort, a consistent effort, building of ecosystem. Everything should be falling in place. Quality control standards, quality of things, reliability, government support, an ecosystem for, let's say, bringing up talent, building talent, retaining them. All these things are required. So when it comes to strategy as to what should be done, it can't be at the cost of, as the question was asked, it can't be at the cost of openness. If it is at the cost of openness, then as all of us have seen in past, it is probably going to breed lack of competitiveness, inefficiency. Then we'd have firms that come up on the basis of connections rather than competition. So we will have to have some sort of, let's say, a ruthless capitalistic system, in the sense competitive system, in which the best product developer gets, as in gets clients. So for that we need an ecosystem, that we have ecosystem of developing, let's say, softwares or any kind of digital products. We've got an excellent ecosystem in form of, let's say, Paytm, completely homegrown company. Paytm, phone pay, and then Google Pay comes up. So Google Pay is competing with its domestically grown peers. So that's a financial digital aspect. In case of payments, like now we have UPI, Beam, as in domestically developed entity, or let's say Cowin platform that we had. So we have Cowin platform, Cowin app, and domestically. Now we are building some sort of an, let's say, UPI for health, in the sense a digital open stack for health as well. So these are things that we are developing, domestically grown entities, and the opportunities that they present going ahead would be immense. But we had a discussion earlier regarding Mr. Piyush Goyal's comments about, let's say, startups in India, that we are building only, let's say, quick commerce companies and not, let's say, some cutting edge technology companies. That debate would always be there. Some preference for domestic firms would always be there, but we have to make sure that that ecosystem remains. So let's not control firms that, okay, तुम केवल delivery करते हो या तुम केवल payment करते हो, तुम कुछ digital product नहीं बनाते हो. It is these products that start to develop that will proliferate in a manner that we can't imagine now. So our strategy today should be to have that enabling ecosystem. Government must be supporting this ecosystem. For example, if not explicitly by using digitally grown products, that may cause some friction with the foreigners. I'll talk about that in a moment also. But at least via, let's say, incentivizing some homegrown entities. For example, that can be done via government asking firms for starting with data localization. That means that forces Google to have its data center here in India, or let's say American Express or Visa or MasterCard to have the data centers here in India. So once that is there, we'll have domestic capabilities for hosting data. Who knows what will that translate into? Then there can be explicit support as well. Government says, okay, we are going to use Zoho for our official communication, we'll not use something else for its communication. Or let's say our domestic answer to WhatsApp, Arattai jaise hai. So we can use these things. But yes, you're right, that may result in some sort of challenges with respect to companies alleging that we are pursuing protectionist policies. So be it. So be it. If there are challenges, what we have learned in recent times is Mr. Donald Trump can tweet anything at any point of the time during the day, and he can push companies to take decisions that are quote unquote pro-America in the immediate term, but anti-everybody else. So I don't want my country to be in that situation, that we are dependent upon that. So if that requires, I would be willing to go for it also. If that requires government to give explicit support at the cost of protectionism, so be it.
So right now it is America first. They're talking about this line again and again, right? So now the question is, it's always about a balance. So what is this balance? So for example, Abdul Kalam sir was once asked, do you support nuclear weapons? He said, it's like a deterrent for other countries not to invade. So everything is like a deterrent. I will be integrated with the globe. At the same time, I will protect my sovereignty. So nothing can be at the cost of my sovereignty when huge countries like US are using slogans like America first, and they are trying to push things. So what I believe is, yes, India should put in all efforts possible, though other countries might feel it is protectionism. When China takes a policy, suppose China has thought about EVs way in 1960s or 1970s, and then once a policy is decided, it works consistently towards it. Doesn't think like what others might think or what happens to other countries, etc. It's single focused. Probably India also should be doing that, at the same time be globally integrated. So it's always a balance between both of them. That is the need of the hour. So right now we need to integrate, at the same time protect ourselves and develop our inner strength. So I think that's what we should be doing right now, and that's what we are doing also.
Thank you, sir. So, as sir said, India is not primarily targeting any kind of protectionism. Although it is a response to the global protectionism, which is being led by the United States, India doesn't want to grow in isolation. What matters to India is its own local data and to have a secure future. So, these things may be incidental in nature. So, we'd like you to share your views and comments as regards this particular video. We'll keep coming up with more such interesting videos and themes. Till then, wish you all the very best.